Irving Bacheller was an American journalist and writer, born in 1859 in Pierpont in the state of New York. He attended St. Lawrence University, Canton, then began working as a journalist for the Brooklyn Daily Times. He then proceeded to found a newspaper syndicate, the first in the United States, distributing the writings of Joseph Conrad, Rudyard Kipling, Arthur Conan Doyle, and Stephen Crane. He was editor of the New York World between 1898 and 1900. The Master of Silence was Batchelor's first novel, but it was his 1900 novel, Eben Holden, A Tale of the North Country, which secured his popularity, selling more than 250,000 copies in 9 months. Several of his succeeding novels would also be very popular, such as Dry and I or The Light in the Clearing. Bacheller served as a war correspondent during the First World War, served on the board trustees for the St. Lawrence University and for Rollins College in Florida, and died in White Plains in 1950. Overall, Irving Bacheller appears to be one of that type of novelist that is somewhat popular in his day and then fades from public memory. While not a complete enigma like some of the authors presented on this channel previously, Bacheler's life seems oddly lacking in interesting episodes. His one major goof seems to have been sending writer Stephen Crane as a war correspondent to Cuba, where the poor man got himself stranded on a dinghy for 2 days when his ship went under. The Master of Silence appears to be Bacheler's only novel one could characterize as belonging to the weird tradition. It deals with a young man named Kendrick who is visited one night by a strange mute person handing him a card from his mysterious, long-unseen uncle Revis Lane. As will become apparent, this family has a bit of an aversion to common names. The note urges the intended recipient, the boy's father, unknowingly to Revis, long since departed, to come, citing consequences of vast importance to me and to mankind as incentive. Before the boy can get an answer to his questions, the mute servant suddenly up and dies, leaving the whole thing a mystery. A few years later, certain Mr. Earl, a man whose connection to the Lane family is never properly dwelled upon, ships off Kendrick to look for his uncle in America. Then we skip 2 years and Kendrick's already at his wit's end. He finally discovers his uncle in a weird lakeside house, shut up from all sides, only discovered by the medium of a convenient newspaper article. Once there, he meets his cousin Rael for the first time, who was intentionally raised by Revis Lane in complete isolation without ever having been taught how to speak because of Rui's idea that speech clouds the mind and distances us from the, quote, truth of things. Of course, you have to only have a cursory understanding of feral children to know this is anything but the truth, nor would a person deprived of the ability to speak until adulthood be able to learn how to talk at all, but this is neither here nor there. Of course, the novel doesn't dwell on the sadism of the man deciding that since his wife died in childbirth, he might literally make his own son into a living science experiment, damaging him beyond repair in God knows how many ways, but it's okay because he brings up God a few times while explaining his reasoning. Once Revis Lane dies, Rael is taken to the outside world, and you'd think this would be now a novel about him trying to fit in with humanity after having spent his entire life alone with just his father and 2 mutes inside of an abandoned old house. But not really. Well, it sort of is like that for a few pages, but it's mostly about Rael's ability to somehow see through people's lives and the subsequent social embarrassment caused thereby. And then he and Kendrick run into Kendrick's old sweetheart by complete accident again, who is now a famous actress. Now, you'd think this would lead to some romantic entanglement involving both the cousins and the lady in question, and it does so for about 2 pages. But then Rael basically says he'll walk it off, and you're left wondering what was even the point. Around the same time, Kendrick gets beaten up by the accomplices of a sinister count whom Rael accused of bank robbery while at a dinner table, and then after they move back to England, there's some reference to a plot by Kendrick's foster mother and her new husband to try and kill him, except it's not really dwelt on at all, and then there's a confused scene of Kendrick starting a fire and Rael being horribly burned and carrying him out, and if you're wondering if that's the end, then pretty much, yeah. Despite the fact that barely anything really happened in this story. It is a strange book. The first chapter draws you in with the sudden appearance of a mute bearing a cryptic note, and even the search for Revis Lane leaves you with some hope, but then it switches between taking potshots at high society, a romance, and an adventure all within the span of a few pages, and it barely dwells on any of it long enough to leave an impression. It isn't a long read, so if you're curious, you can go and seek it out, but there are better works of a similar nature out there.